Welcome everyone, welcome to Life Hacks. I'm Roshan and I'm going to be sharing with you a couple of great life hacks, and today I'm going to start with time boxing. Not sure if anyone has heard of time boxing. I know you've heard of time blocking. I'm going to share with you this really cool simple hack. In fact, I live by it today. In 2012, something happened to me. I read this article by a guy called Dan Markovits, and he said that to-do lists, right? And I lived by to-do lists, right? To-do lists are basically useless. They make us less productive, and there's this crippling paradox of choice, which he talks about, which basically dilapidates us. And so he said, throw away to-do lists and focus on something different. And as I was exploring, I found this whole concept of time boxing. And what is time boxing? Simply put, with a to-do list, right? When we think about a to-do list, you've got like maybe 50 things to do today. And our brain can maximum manage about 7 choices. But our to-do list may have 50, 60, 70, different choices. And guess what's going to happen? We get so crippled just trying to figure out what to do with this to-do list. And so we tend to do this. We tend to very focus on the easy tasks. Okay, this is easy. Let me do that. This is tough. Maybe important, but tough. Let me just hold that off for later. And so that's what happens with to-do lists. We get crippled by choice. And so the better way to do this is to calendar everything. So instead of having a to-do list, you transfer every single task that you have into your calendar. And this allows you to overcome this whole paradox of choice and this whole overwhelm that hits us. And that's really what time boxing is. So time boxing is simply taking items that you need to do, tasks that you need to do, and moving it into your calendar. And this is a term that was basically developed and introduced by a guy called James Martin in his book Rapid Application Development. So why it's very powerful is because when you schedule something, it gets done. You don't schedule it, there's a high likelihood that it won't get done, right? So when you think about, just thinking about my own personal experience, right? Whenever there is time allocated for a certain task, specifically time that's actually allocated in my calendar, I actually end up doing it. But with the influx of non-stop meetings and constant distraction happening all around us, if a task is there but not blocking time for it sometimes does not help. So you really need to block time out. But there is a difference between just blocking time versus time boxing. So blocking time is important, right? So when you block a time in your calendar, you allocate a certain period to do a piece of work. But with time blocking, it means that when let's say you've allocated 30 minutes and you finish that work in 30 minutes, great. But let's say you allocated 30 minutes and you didn't finish that work, what happens is you then will add more time. You add time to your calendar. Now with time boxing, the difference is this. Once you allocate a time, you decide, okay, this task is going to take me 45 minutes. I'm allocating that 45 minutes, regardless at the end of the 45 minutes, whether the work was completed or partially done, I'm done with that piece of work. I submit it, I push it forward, I send that email out, it's done, right? So time boxing is basically saying there's a box to do this work or this task. Once that box is over, it's over, it's done, right? So that's the difference between time blocking and time boxing. Now, it's very important for us to understand, right, why it's important to do time boxing instead of time blocking. Because according to Parkinsons Law, and this is what his law says, right, work expands continuously as to fill up all the time available for its completion. So simply put, if you allocate 4 hours to complete a task, even though the task may take 30 minutes, you will somehow subconsciously expand your work so that the task will take 4 hours. Work somehow keeps expanding the longer you have it. Now, by time boxing, you force yourself to be efficient and complete the work in a specified given time, right? So I want to talk a little bit about some of the other benefits of time boxing, right? So think about this. Sometimes with to-do lists, you kind of miss the tasks that you hate, that are tough, right? But what happens is with time boxing, you may have 50 tasks and you schedule it. So maybe you will schedule those tasks later. Okay, I didn't schedule it this week, maybe it's next week, but somehow it will eventually get scheduled and it will eventually see the light of day, right? So the good news about time boxing is, yeah, I got these tasks, but eventually even the harder, older, tougher, the task that you hate gets scheduled. And ultimately when it gets scheduled, hopefully it gets done. right? Now think about another great benefit is because of the strict time limits that we impose on specific tasks, right? So it's 25 minutes to do this task, 45 minutes. You become very efficient and you find the best and fastest way to get those tasks completed. Now, the third benefit is that because there's a limited time, you will feel very focused and less distracted. And you know, you've got only 25 minutes. If you don't do this in that allocated time, it's gone. The task is done. So you'll be very mindful that you need to really focus on this time to get it done. If not, it's gone, right? So that drives that focus and that rigor, right? And the other piece is for perfectionists. Time boxing will also allow you to be okay with good work, not necessarily perfect, but good work. And that's a great process for some of us who are super perfectionists. So now you'll say, hey, sign me up. How do I start? Where do I start? What do I do? Right? Very simple. You start by opening up your calendar and blocking out specific time in your calendar for specific tasks. So if your to-do list say has 150 tasks, you start spacing them in your calendar and you will start saying, okay, this week I'll do 50 of them, and then the next week 70 of them, and then I really have to push it to the third week, right? And don't worry if you make mistakes initially on the time allocation. You get better as you get more experienced on this. Now, what was also very interesting for me, at least, and I'm sure you face the same thing, is that you will notice very quickly that if you have 100 tasks to complete this week, you will start allocating them based on your calendar, and you'll soon realize, hey, wait, I've got 100 tasks to do this week, but I just don't have the time to do these 100 tasks. And this will come to help you to say, hey, I just have to say no. I know it's going to be crazy because, we just want to do everything. But when you start stacking up the tasks based on the time, you start to realize very fast that you just can't. You just cannot cope with the numerosity of the tasks. So you just say no. We just learn to say no, right? So that's one good thing that comes out of time boxing. Now, remember, time boxing means that you set a fixed amount of time for a particular task, right? So just as you would schedule a meeting, say you schedule a meeting for 30 minutes, followed by another meeting, followed by another meeting for an hour, and so on and so forth. At the end of the 30 minutes at a meeting 1, you stop and you go to meeting 2, and you stop and you go to meeting 3. Now the same thing applies for your task. You close out one task, 30 minutes, another task, 30 minutes, another task, 45 minutes, another task, an hour, whatever it is, right? And remember, the bigger, the more complex the task, you don't have to allocate 10 hours to do the task. You break it down to small, manageable chunks. Our brain really can manage at the most about 90 minutes to do something, right? Ideally, and we'll talk a little bit about one of the tips at the end, how we can even break it down even smaller to more manageable chunks. So remember, time boxing is just like scheduling a meeting, right? But you're scheduling tasks. All right. Now, I know you're going to ask me this question. I know this question will invariably be asked, and you say, wait, I'm working on this task and I get into the zone, I get into the flow, and I just don't want to stop. I want to keep going, right? I don't want to go because I'm in the zone, right? And I know that second part is to be done later, but I'm in the zone, man. Just let me finish it, right? And the thing I usually say is this, when you go for a meeting and the meeting is really good meeting, but the time's up, right? You move on to the next meeting. And sometimes also when you watch a movie and it's a really good movie, you want to finish it and you kind of finish it, but it happens the same for bad movies too, right? When you watch a bad movie and say, look, I'm going to just see this movie for about 15 minutes and I'm going to switch it off, but somehow after 15 minutes, so even no matter how bad, you just can't, and then you end up watching and I've done this before where I started binge watching, supposed to say I'm going to do 1 hour to watch TV, and then it's a Daredevil series or I don't know what, you get so overwhelmed and you keep watching episode 2, 3, 4, 5, and soon you're like 5-6 hours in. Now it's the same thing. Flow is great, but you want to manage the flow and say, look, this is the task. I'm going to move to the next task. I'm going to move to the next task. I'm going to move to the next meeting. And, we have to respect your calendar. Now, I would recommend time boxing everything. It's not just for tasks, right? You can time box lunch, exercise. You can time box, how to be healthy, and also time box rest, right? Rest is very important, right? Food, absolutely important, right? And then make sure you add in the let's say you allocate that 30 minutes for lunch, and but that healthier option is that extra 10 minutes walk to get to that, not just go to the office pantry and get the junk or the nearby 7-Eleven, but really go to a healthy option. Allocate that extra 10 minutes and get there, right? You can also time box family activities with your kid, with your significant other, everything, right? And the more you time box, the more you realize how you utilize your time. And that's going to be critical as you start looking at yourself. Now, remember, at first, when you start it off, it'll be very painful, especially for the big tasks. But you'll get better at breaking down that book that you always wanted to complete. And you said, I'm going to complete it in two years. And I'm going to do 1,000 words daily for 2 hours. And time box that 2 hours in your calendar. But at first it'll be very painful, but it will get better and better and better. And once you figure it out, you will become extremely productive, right? So my final tips, I'm going to give you 4 final tips. And my first tip is always try to schedule your hard tasks first. No one likes pain, but by completing your hard tasks first, you get to work on the easier tasks later in the day. And when you complete them, you will feel less pain. Remember, the pain happened earlier in the day. I write about this because I wrote a lot about pain. And there's this concept about eat the frog and do the tough parts first, and later the easy parts will feel like a joy, and you end the day, wow, I'm so happy, right? Versus trying to dredge the last part of the day where you've got the tough task to handle, right? So do the tough task first. Now, number 2, reward yourself after each task. It's very important to reward yourself, and the rewards can be simple, like taking a break, a short snooze, some food, some nice drink. But keep in mind that rewarding yourself with ice cream after each task may end up with diabetes, which is not so good for you. Charles Duhigg, I read this excellent book that he wrote, The Power of Habit. He shares that when you create a habit like time boxing, the end of the cycle, right? So you get to create a ritual. At the end of the cycle, you need to end with a reward. So find a simple reward that excites you, a hug from a significant other, anything, right? But simple. Hopefully it doesn't cause you diabetes, but something that enables you to feel, yeah, man, I've done that. It's like ticking off that task, right? But reward yourself after each task. Number 3, use the Bondomorrow technique. Now this is where I told you, right? Our brain, ideally, the most we can do is about 90 minutes. Now, the Bondomorrow technique was developed by this guy called Francesco Cirillo, and he basically recommends that you break your task to a maximum of 25 minutes period, followed by a 5-minute break or 5 minutes reward, right? A reward period where you can reward yourself with that ice cream or that chocolate or whatever that you craved. But 25 minutes, 5 minutes, and then 25 minutes, 5 minutes, 25 minutes, 5 minutes. So, it's 30 minutes chunks, but really 25 minutes of intense work and focus and getting it done, that task, and then 5 minutes of reward, rest, or whatever your fancy is. Now, the last piece of advice is to make time visual, right? Keep a timer near you. Make sure the alarm rings when the time is up, 25 minutes, boom. I'm like, okay, man, I'm on. I'm taking my break now. These visual cues are absolutely critical for you to be conscious of your time limits and to make sure that you're aware of the need to keep your commitments and timing. Also, you want to make sure your task is set for a time set that works for you. The human mind, like I said, cannot concentrate for more than 90 minutes. So 25 minutes is ideal. You can do 45 minutes, you can do 60 minutes, but just try not to go over 90 minutes and make sure that timer is very visual. So with that, I want to wish you very happy time boxing. And this is Roshan closing out with life hacks for you. All the best in your leadership journey ahead.